Now, we love the social media space when it comes to the college football public. I think it's funny, I think it's witty, I think it's clever, but I also think now that in today's day and age of covering college football, there's a lot of people that want to be the first one to the punchline, the first one to make the witty joke, the first one to make fun of somebody to get a couple of retweets and likes and all that, and we appreciate where that comes from, but I also would say that punchline culture as a whole now has got to watch their back just a little bit when it comes to the 2025 season. Welcome into the Hard Count. It is Thursday, June 19th, 2025, last one on the face of the planet. We're taking it back to what we call punchline culture on this show. What I just prefaced a little bit, I'll preface a little bit more right now. In the world of college football, I think in modern society in general, everybody wants to be the first one to make the statement that gets a bunch of traction on social media. And when you make that statement, good for you. But understand now, there's a very real possibility that after you make that statement, that the statement you made may not age all that well. I'll give you an example. What were people saying right around this time a year ago? Ryan Day, not that great of a coach, can't win the big one, can't get over the hump. And then you fast forward the tape, and Ryan Day's hoisting the national title trophy in Atlanta. Marcus Freeman, when Notre Dame loses to NIU, everyone says, hey, is he the right guy at Notre Dame? You saw all the jokes, all the memes, all the quick quips, if you will, about what he was as a head coach, and then you fast forward the tape, and he's playing for a national championship at Notre Dame. So we're going to take a bat to a couple of different punchlines that are out there right now across the college football world. I want to start in Coral Gables. It's kind of a two-piece special when it comes to the punchline culture around the Hurricanes right now. The first punchline you're hearing is that Miami is always overhyped. Mario Cristobal never won anything. They're not going to do anything. You know, Miami, you say this every year, and you say good things about Miami just because of the logo. That's the first punchline you hear. The second punchline you hear is that Carson Beck isn't that good either. Last year at Georgia, throwing double-digit interceptions. I mean, he had a good year the year before, but like we all kind of got to see what Carson Beck actually is with this last season at Georgia, right? He's not going to do anything at Miami. Everyone's quick to make jokes, but I'll just say this. When you look at Mario Cristobal and his body of work since he's gotten to Miami, you would think that what he's done at Miami relative to the punchlines is like, well, they must be missing bowl games all the time. I mean, they must be falling flat on their face relative to expectations. Every single year, the Canes have won more games since Mario Cristobal got there. It's been a steady upward trajectory. 5-7, 7-5. 10 games last year. And they didn't win the ACC, so I understand you fell short of your expectations. But the way that we talk about Miami, to me, is a little bit warped relative to social media to what Miami's actually done on the football field. I would also say this. The thought that Mario Cristobal hasn't won anything in general is just wrong. I mean, he's won multiple conference titles. And when you look at how they've recruited, and this isn't winning anything in actuality, but look at the process and the progress for Miami. He's recruited at a really high level. Miami's had the best class in the ACC the last 3 years. 2 of those last 3 years, they've had a top 10 class. I want to go back to what I just said a second ago. The process and the progress at Miami, to me, I'm buying stock because I see the arrow continuing to point upward. And in the modern age of college football and social media, we don't really like to give any patience to the process or pay attention to trajectory because we want to talk about what's happening right now. And I understand that. I think there's value in speaking to things that are actually happening in the moment. But when we totally just discount the way things are trending, I think we do ourselves a disservice. I think that's where we get into trouble when we talk about punchline culture. Miami is nowhere near a finished product. Nowhere near. And Mario Cristobal, I think, just now is getting his sea legs when it comes to the foundation of his roster. You got the guys that were, guys he recruited on early that are just now starting to become upperclassmen. Francis Mawanoa, Ruben Bain. Really good players that are now actually a proof in the pudding of the development and the process that Miami's had internally for some time now. And you know who Miami reminds me of? They remind me a lot of Texas over the course of the last couple of years, just in terms of how we've talked about them. How often do you hear somebody in your group chat or someone on social media say something to the effect of, every year we talk about Texas being a team that could compete for the conference title, or they got a bunch of 5 stars, they got a bunch of talent, and then every single year we're sitting here in December talking about the mediocrity that Texas football achieved. Every single year we're saying that, right? Well, people are saying the same thing about Miami right now. And just because it hasn't happened yet in actuality doesn't mean they're not doing the right things behind closed doors. Again, you won 10 games last year. I understand Cam Ward was a massive part of that, but you know who else was a massive part of that? Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator, he's still there. Mark Cristobal, he's still there. I just told you about all the recruiting classes. I think there's a lot to be made for the progress internally at Miami that's eventually, I think, going to show itself on the field here in 2025 and beyond. So if you're talking about Miami underachieving and all this, that, and the other, it might happen, but I wouldn't act like Miami's been just a non-factor in the world of college football for the better part of the last couple of seasons, especially last season. Now, the Carson Beck punchline culture, I think, is very intriguing because his, I think, is a little bit more straightforward. You either believe that what you saw last year from him at Georgia was reliable as to how good of a quarterback he is, or you say, well, there was a lot more context as to why he wasn't as successful in 2024 relative to what he did in 2023. And I think, to be honest, some part of this with the discussion around Carson Beck is just how public he's chosen to be as a football player off the field. And I want to give this disclaimer. When you choose to be public with your life off the field, you welcome all the extra conversation that comes with that when you don't perform on the field. And Carson Beck, even though he had a decent season last year, throwing for over, right around 3,500 yards, I think it was like 3,485, give or take. When you throw as many interceptions as you do, people are going to point to everything else they have access to in your life. But for me, I choose to believe that Carson Beck, over the course of one season at Georgia, playing another year as a starting quarterback in Athens, I don't think he just got worse at football over the course of 1 year. I don't. I think that it's probably more likely that without a running game and without Brock Bowers and without Ladd McConkey, he had less success. That feels pretty fair to point to. Georgia still won the SEC. It wasn't like Carson Beck just fell flat on his face as the quarterback out there. So the idea that Miami's getting damaged goods in Carson Beck or he's not going to be all that or whatever, again, I'm telling you, I think there's a reason now why NFL scouts a year ago said this dude could be the first pick in the NFL draft. Now, it didn't happen that way, but to act like there's not still the skill set and the potential to do that, to me, is mind-boggling. So all the people with the punchline culture, Miami's not that good. They're always overhyped. They're always this. They're always that. Mark Cristobal's not a great coach. Social media says one thing. What's happened on the field, though, for Miami with how they're trending upwards, with how Carson Beck has played before in his college football career and what he could be, I think that may say something else here in 2025. So get your laughs in now, get your jokes in now, but I might hit the delete button on some of those tweets when it comes time for those games to actually be played and what we're looking at here in the month of December in the world of college football. Hey, glad to have you all a part of this, man. Make sure you are subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. College football, nothing but college football all year round. It's a wonderful time, man. Media days. We keep saying it, but media days are dangerously close. We will be in Atlanta, Georgia. Myself and Caden Smith, it'll be a buffet of content for y'all. So make sure you're dialed in and make sure you are subscribed. But speaking of media days, I think there's a bit of conversation to be had around the way the SEC was discussed right around a year ago and how the SEC is being discussed right now. So we'll unpack that together. Again, make sure you're subscribed to College Football, nothing but college football for everyone watching this as a one-off clip. I want to address the punchline culture, and I also want to give a prediction as it pertains to the SEC. Because the discussion around the SEC right now is that the conference itself is overrated. Hand up, I missed on my discussion with the SEC a year ago. I thought they'd have 5 teams in the college football playoff. That clearly did not happen, all right? And I think everyone was very quick to say, well, look, y'all keep saying it just means more. You talk about all your draft picks you have, talk about how good you're supposed to be in hypothetical games, and look what happens when you actually play the games. You got Ole Miss losing to Kentucky, Alabama losing to Vandy and Oklahoma, and some conference, SEC, a bit overrated. Last year, I think you can say that's the case. I think that's probably true. And this is not me sitting here giving you this qualification of, well, look at who else they have to play throughout the course of the year. Well, look at how rigorous the grind of their schedule is. I'm not even having that discussion with you right now because, almost when you lose to Kentucky, you lose the defense of what your season was. You lose the, well, yeah, but look at who we played kind of discussion. It's Kentucky, man. That's not me dunking on Kentucky. It's just the reality. Same deal for Ole Miss and Oklahoma, or Alabama and Oklahoma. You don't have this mulligan that you earn from those games. But what I would say is relative to the 2025 season, I think that the whole idea that the SEC is overrated, I don't know that the SEC is going to be just far and away the best conference in college football, but I will say this. The NFL draft still says the SEC is the most talented conference in college football. All right, and this is not me carrying water for the SEC and go to an SEC school. I don't have family that went to an SEC school. I grew up in Southern California. Like, I don't have any reason to go to bat for the SEC here, folks. Like, this is just kind of what the NFL draft is saying. If the SEC is somehow, this massive ruse to have this seat at the table in the world of college football, and SEC bias is real, the NFL draft is in on it, because right around half the first round is from the SEC, based on this past NFL draft that happened. So, getting back to this discussion, as we look to what 2025 is, I think that last year what the SEC was a lot of the schools that you would expect to be heavyweights not looking very heavyweight-ish, right? Like Texas, I mean, they were a great team last year, but they didn't play for a national championship. Got beat by Ohio State. Okay, great. Georgia, they got beat by Notre Dame in the college football playoff in their first college football playoff game. Okay, great. I told you about Alabama and what they weren't last year. So there's a lot of familiar faces that I don't think you could say Texas underachieved. That's probably a little bit mislabeling, if you will, when it comes to that discussion. But the SEC as a whole, relative to how they were talked about in the preseason and relative to what they actually did during the college football season, as a conference, I think you could say they underachieved or overrated or however you want to label them. But I think what's being maybe missed in this discussion for 2025 is all the schools that I would say are probably surging that we wouldn't put in the top tier of the conference, but now we're talking about being a team that could make the college football playoff. I put LSU in that discussion. I put A&M in that discussion. South Carolina is in that discussion. We talk about Oklahoma and what they could be. I mean, Florida and with DJ Lagway. Like, there's so many teams here where the arrow is very clearly pointing up. I wouldn't be shocked if one of those schools jumped up, made some noise in the postseason this upcoming year. Alabama, still a top 10 roster. Texas, Georgia, top 3 roster talent in all of college football. Tennessee, who knows what they are, but they were a playoff team last year. I think that the sheer number of schools that could compete for college football playoff relevance, that's what I think is maybe being missed in the whole the SEC is overrated discussion. So again, get all your takes out there. The SEC is, fallen. The SEC is not the big dog in college football anymore. I'm sitting here telling you the Big Ten is probably still the best conference in college football. But to say the SEC is overrated or it's not, one of the best in college football still, I think it's a discussion of inches. I don't think it's feet when it comes to that whole idea of the best conference in college football. But I also think that when you talk about the most talented conference in college football, again, the NFL continues to tell us it's the SEC. So when we talk about the prediction that I have for the SEC, I think you'll have 4 teams from that conference in the college football playoff. Might be more, might be exactly 4. I don't know, but I'll say I think you have at least 4 teams from the SEC in the college football playoff here in 2025. Last thing I'll add, I do think the SEC in this punchline culture discussion welcomes a little bit of extra flack upon themselves because let's be real, the SEC is one of the most confident, I would say borderline arrogant conferences in college sports. And so when you tell everyone how good you are, when you chant SEC at different sporting events, whether it be football, baseball, basketball, whatever it is, like people are going to like to see you fail. And when you do fail, they will let you know about it. So the SEC is overrated. Some of that I think is based on maybe just a personal disposition towards the SEC. Some of that I think is warranted based on what the SEC wasn't last year. But in 2025, there's a large amount of depth, I think, in the world of the SEC relative to what the rest of the college football playoff could look like in terms of contenders. So I can't wait to watch it. I can't wait to see it. But get your punchline culture out there for the SEC. I don't think it'll last all that long when it comes time for games to actually be played. So let's go from the Southeast out to the West Coast now. Let's talk about the discussion around Lincoln Riley and the punchline culture as it pertains to him. We landed on a lower third here of can Lincoln Riley hang? Lincoln Riley can't hang, kind of being the punchline culture around USC. Because I've heard a bunch of different things around him as a head coach. I've heard everything from he's not the right guy at USC to he doesn't have the chops to coach at a place like that to he's overrated as a coach. So we just settled on the idea that Lincoln Riley overall can't hang when it comes to big-time college football. And I think some of that comes from his success at Oklahoma and then him getting to USC and not having that same caliber of success, making the college football playoff. I think there's also the idea that he's this quarterback guru. He specializes in just that side of the football, which he is a quarterback guru, but sometimes when you are so great with a certain position, people start to say, well, are you really a head coach? If you're so good at that one position, why don't you go be a coordinator somewhere else? And then you have on top of that the idea that USC was bad on defense the last couple of seasons outside of last year, and that in itself is true. And also his defense was bad at Oklahoma. So my take on this whole idea around Lincoln Riley and his chops as a head coach, are you sure this is actually what you believe? Or are you just kind of going with what's the fun thing to say in the moment, kind of just being a sheep? Because I think right now it's unpopular to say that Lincoln Riley is a good head coach in the world of college football. And that's just my feel on this. I don't know if that's how it actually is when it comes to different parts of the West Coast. Maybe some people are a little more positive on the Lincoln Riley front, but I think that's kind of how people feel based on what happened last year. But my rebuttal to that would be, well, you're saying they're a middle of the pack Big Ten team, right? It's probably the basis you're standing on to Lincoln Riley not being a great head coach in college football. Okay, did you watch the games? Because you're pointing to the record, and that's all well and good, but did you watch the games? Because Lincoln Riley and USC, they did not compete like a middle of the pack Big Ten team. I mean, they played the runner-up in the Big Ten in Penn State to overtime, played the runner-up in the national championship in Notre Dame to a very close game for the majority of that thing. It was a game in the fourth quarter. Didn't look like a middle-of-the-pack Big Ten team to me. So there's a difference between box score scouting and then actually watching the games themselves. If you watch the games themselves, is USC where they want to be yet? Absolutely not. Are they a finished product? No way. First year in the Big Ten, still acclimating, still doing some things they got to get right on that roster. But to say that USC is just a middle-of-the-pack Big Ten team, I think you're trusting the record far more than the actual games themselves. And that's what I don't really appreciate when it comes to this idea that Lincoln Riley is not a great head coach or not a good enough head coach at USC. The other thing that people point to is, well, hey, JD, the defense sucked. Yeah, it used to. It used to suck. But you know why they don't suck anymore? Because Lincoln Riley went out and hired Dan Lanning, went out and hired Eric Henderson. He put together, I think, one of the best defensive staffs in all of college football. And so as much as you want to dunk on Lincoln Riley for his defense not being good in previous years, and you would be correct and very much so warranted in doing so, make sure you also give credit for him hiring a great defensive staff that drastically improved Lincoln Riley's defense a year ago. Like I think that deserves a lot of attention when it comes to how he's evolving as a head coach. That's the big thing, man. Great coaches, we'll talk about this throughout the course of this show, they evolve, they adapt, and they find a way to correct their mistakes and their blind spots. Now, you would have liked Lincoln Riley to do that a little bit quicker, but I do think now that the ability to still hire a staff that's as good as it is on defense for USC, there's one guy in charge of that, from what I can gather now. Now, I think the other maybe most valid pushback from people around Lincoln Riley is, well, JD, they lost a lot of these games in the fourth quarter. I did watch the games. I saw them lose in the fourth quarter. That kind of falls on coaching and culture, right? Yeah, it does, but just what we said, adapting is a big part of this. If people have been paying attention to how USC's put together their new staff out there in Los Angeles, they just hired a new strength coach. And talking to people close to USC, the reasoning behind that was to try and elevate culture, was to try and elevate accountability, things that ultimately make a big difference for you in the fourth quarter of football games. And head coaches, I would say, set the culture. Your strength staff, your strength head coach, they instill the culture. Like, you spend the most time as a college football player with your strength and conditioning staff throughout the course of an entire year. Like, that is who you are with essentially every single day throughout an entire year, not your college football season. And so I think at the very least now, Lincoln Riley seems to be adjusting a little bit more quickly, be a little bit more efficient in adapting. And I think as long as you're doing those right things, at a certain point in time, the right things keyword should, translate to the right results. And so the reason why I'm still believing in USC and believing in Lincoln Riley as a head coach is just what I said. All of the different blind spots that we've seen USC have to some degree, he is continuing to, at some way, shape, or form, at some pace, adjust and adapt to those. The roster needs to be better. Okay, USC goes out and has a killer, right now at least, 2026 recruiting class. Defense not good enough. Again, would have liked to see this move happen a little bit sooner, but now USC's got one of the best staffs in college football. Culture got to be better. Get a strength coach to help adjust that culture. Right things over an elongated period of time. I think those things are too solid right now at USC, and Lincoln Riley has put those things in place to where I trust the results to eventually find their way to Los Angeles. It may not be a Big Ten title this year. It may not be a college football playoff appearance this year, but at some point in time, you stack enough days, your head coach puts the right things in place, you get those results. Now, I also think it should be noted, USC, they weren't really in a great spot before Lincoln Riley got there when it comes to what they were. However, Oregon, they were in a pretty good spot when Dan Lanning showed up. And there's this narrative around Oregon that I don't know that I totally understand all the way, but I get where it comes from. There's this idea that Oregon, as a program, just flops in the postseason. Like they lose to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and everyone's just running to Twitter. Typical Oregon. That O stands for 0 national championships is what they do. And it's like, I get where it comes from, but I don't think the logic of it is all the way sound. That's the thing about Punchline culture, man. You run to Twitter, you fire it off, and if it's funny enough and it clicks, people will like it, people will retweet it, and everyone has a good time in the moment. But if you actually like examine the logic, it's a little bit smoke and mirrors to me. So again, the punchline here that people love to run to is Oregon always flops in the postseason, the big games, and whatever. Where this comes from, again, last year's Rose Bowl fiasco, but before that now, in 2014, Oregon lost the national title game. In 2010, also lost the national title game. So if Oregon had won a national championship in either of those games, do we have the same discussion? I don't know, but again, they didn't, so here we are. In this whole idea of Oregon not being great in the postseason, it's a little bit funny because you know who wasn't there for the majority of those games I just mentioned? Dan Lanning, who was there for the Rose Bowl game. Make no mistake about it. I think he would tell you that Oregon was not ready to play in that game, and they lost to the eventual national champion in Ohio State, so it is what it is. But to pin the Oregon postseason shortcomings on a head coach who wasn't even there for them or make him deal with that, narrative, isn't that a little bit foolish? Aren't we a little bit better than that as a college football community? You would hope so. But I do think that Dan Lanning overall, he's not new to the punchline culture game. Remember, a year ago, what were people saying about Dan Lanning? Not a great in-game coach. I mean, he goes for it on fourth down against Washington. What is he doing? Goes for it in the first half against Washington for a 2-point conversion that ended up coming back to bite him. What is he doing? Dan Lanning, he can't coach on Saturdays. Good recruiter, good roster builder, but he's not a great coach on Saturdays. And then fast forward to the game against Ohio State in the regular season where Oregon beats Ohio State, and we're sitting here rewriting the rule book because of an in-game coaching decision that Oregon made from Dan Lanning that ended up being a massive differentiating factor for them in the fourth quarter and the final moments of that game to have a 12th man on the field. So kind of funny how we're not really saying that anymore about Dan Lanning, right? After they went 13-0, won the Big Ten, not really saying that anymore, huh? Very interesting how quickly the punchline culture can change around a certain player and coach. I will say, though, I do think if Oregon won a national championship, this whole thought goes away. In one game, it just goes away. I mean, when are we talking about the 2014 game or 2010 against Auburn? Like, it would just, right away, gone. And I don't know that we talk about this enough in the world of, sports media. Dude, it's hard to win a national championship. They give out one of those a year. Or I'll say this, one of those a year is earned. And there's over 134 teams now in college football, 136 with the addition of, I believe it's Montana State and Delaware. Took Kirby Smart 6 years. Took Ryan Day 6 years. Dabo Swinney, 8 seasons. Nick Saban, 9 seasons. This isn't a thing where you just wake up one day and your team's a national champion just because you put together a good roster and you had a couple things break your way. Like, it's very hard. You build to it over the course of a couple of different, failures, quite frankly. And I think Dan Lanning, over the course of his last 3 seasons at Oregon, has experienced those failures that will eventually propel him to be where he wants to be when it's all said and done with his time in Eugene. And here's the facts around Dan Lanning, all right? I just told you, 3 years, 35-6. Best team in college football last year at the end of the regular season. The reason why I'm so confident in Dan Lanning is because he continues to, just what we said, adjust. It's what good coaches, good businessmen, good students, just successful people in life, they adjust, they adapt to when they fail. And we saw that. They lost the conference title game in 2023. 2024, what happens? Go to the Big Ten title game, they win that thing. Have to think that in some way, shape, or form, the failure of losing the Pac-12 championship in 23 benefited their preparation to winning the Big Ten title in 2024. Now, maybe it's not a one-to-one correlation, but you hear what I'm saying. I think he adjusted from that. Also, we've seen him adjust when it comes to his roster and his staff. Kenny Dillingham, great OC for Oregon, leaves to ASU, doing great things now at ASU. Who does he hire? Will Stein. Okay, pretty good adjustment. Bo Nix goes pro. Who do they go get? Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel has been finalist. Pretty good adjustment. Now you have Dante Moore waiting in the wings, 5-star guy. I think you're probably in good shape there. Again, good adjustment. And so over the course of time now, again, you recruit as well as you do, you adjust as well as you do. Oregon is doing too many of the right things for me to believe it's not going to happen at some point in time for Dan Lanning. Too well-resourced. He sets the culture at too high a level, too high a temperature, and they're just too talented, quite frankly, to not be in this discussion every single year. So Oregon loses the big one every year, whatever, say what you want to say. But I'm just telling you now, Punchline Culture, I think, will be in for it when Dan Lanning does eventually win a national championship. At some point in time, Dan Lanning will win a national title in Eugene. And I think that some point in time will be in the next 3 seasons. I really do. Maybe it's this year. We'll see what happens. But Punchline Culture around Oregon, a little bit foolish for my money, but so it goes. So it goes. So let's finish with this here, man. I want to talk about Brent Venables and the discussion around Oklahoma football, and it pertains to what he's done out there so far. There's this idea, I think, that Brent Venables isn't a head coach in college football, or doesn't have the juice to be a head coach in college football, maybe is a better way to say it. And where this comes from is the 3-year sample size you have from him at Oklahoma. People are saying, well, JD, first year he won 6 games. Second year was a good year, but third year, well, again, 6 games. You can't win 6 games 2 of the last 3 years and be considered a good enough head coach at the University of Oklahoma. We expect too much. I hear where that's coming from. I do. But I think that 3-year sample size, quite frankly, is a little bit skewed. You need the context when you're unpacking what Oklahoma is under Brent Venables. We'll do that right now. Before we do that, though, make sure you are subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel, College Football. Nothing but college football year round. All right, want y'all a part of this. The best way to be a part of this is by subscribing. So if you're an Oklahoma fan, get dialed in. Let us know you want more Sooner content. The best way to let us know you want more Sooner content is by being subscribed. So like I just said, I think the sample size around Brent Venables and his 3 seasons in Norman requires a little bit of an explanation. The first year, his roster got bodied by the portal. Don't think we have to say much more than that. You win 6 games, it is what it is. Year 2, win 10 football games. Okay, now we're talking. Year 3, first year in the SEC, new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, brand new offensive line. You win 6 games in the most talented conference in college football. It is what it is. Now, hear me clearly. I am not saying that year 3 in any way, shape, or form is acceptable or it's okay or, they had a new OC, so therefore give them some slack. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying if you want to evaluate Brent Venables properly, understand the circumstances he worked with, didn't even mention the injuries, they have to at least be accounted for when you're trying to talk about him as a head coach. Now, here's why I think he'll be successful long-term in Norman. I think that Brent Venables does a lot of the things that old college football requires, which is putting together a good staff and being able to put together a good game plan. We've seen defensively, I think, one of the best minds in the sport. We've said that now many, many times. You say, well, Jody, his offense was bad, right? You talked about his OC not being good enough, right? Yeah, that's true. The OC was not a great fit or it wasn't a success, whoever you want to pin it on. I think you got to pin it on in some way, shape, or form, the OC. But why didn't you have a good offensive coordinator a year ago? Because the OC he had before in Jeff Lebby was a head coach in the SEC. So clearly he was doing something right when it came to putting together that staff. Look at his current OC, Ben Arbuckle, just had a top 15 scoring offense in college football a year ago. I think that's going to be really successful. So again, putting together a staff, game plan, all those things, I think he's pretty good at. I think what maybe has been lacking in recent history in Norman are the things that require or that equate to success in new college football, which is what? Roster management, roster construction, I think NIL in general. I don't know this to be 100% true, so Sooner fans, let's have a conversation about this. I think NIL as of late has started to have an arrow pointing more upwards. All right, John Mateer, I feel like, is a good example of that. I think bringing in Jim Nagy, I don't think he leaves his job at the Senior Bowl to come to Norman if there's not good resources to put together a top-tier roster. So I think the way that Oklahoma is adjusting their philosophy above Brent Venables and what Brent Venables brings to the table, I think that marriage overall, should he be given the right amount of time, will eventually have success at a somewhat high level in Norman. Again, I think his best days are ahead of him. Now, here's the key ingredient to all this working. What Brent Venables needs more than anything else to succeed at Oklahoma is momentum right now. It's not all the way fair to say that. It's not necessarily popular to say that. But right now, with a transfer quarterback, a new staff, offensively that is, I think you need to have success today, Junior. Because if you're able to have success on the field in 2025, guess what? Maybe, just maybe, John Mateer comes back and says, I want to increase my draft stock, whatever. But even if he leaves, you position yourself to be a portal destination for quarterbacks. And you, I think, maybe remove some anxiety for anyone that was considering Oklahoma as a portal player or on the recruiting trail, that I can come to Oklahoma and it's still Oklahoma. It's still the Oklahoma I grew up watching when Sam Bradford was out there slinging the ball around the yard, winning Heisman trophies, when Baker Mayfield was there, when Kyler Murray was there, when Jalen Hurts was there. Like, it's still that same Oklahoma that has the same prestige, brand power, success on the field. It's not just a logo. It's actually a logo that has some real juice behind it now because of what I saw in 2025. So I don't think 2025 is what it all hinges on necessarily, but it would be nice to have a little bit of momentum from 2025 to boost that thing forward. All right, so overall, though, Brent Venables, I think he's made of the right stuff. I think if you're going to say he's not a head coach in the sport, you're a little bit hasty with that accusation. I love that the new structure at Oklahoma overall seems to be pointing towards the things that will equate to success in modern college football. And Brent Venables overall, I think he's made of the stuff that will have success in college football, period. So I can't wait to see what they do. But it's been no secret, man, we are enormously high on the Sooners and what they're going to be here in 2025. And based on that segment, beyond. So we appreciate y'all being dialed in, man. We're right around the corner from getting some more media day coverage, from getting some fall camp intel, some fall camp propaganda. It's that time, man. We love it. We're excited for it. We know you're excited for it, and we appreciate y'all being dialed in and making this show what it is. For Caden Smith on the ones and the twos, for myself, Jody PicKell, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We will keep this party rolling. We will see y'all.